So a guy reached out to Nerds on Earth and he says, I have some Daredevil comics that I want to sell. And I'm like, yeah, man, I love Daredevil. Which comics? And he's like, yeah, I have full run. So I'm like, all right, let's get together immediately because this is awesome. So if you subscribe, follow along, then you know that I have shown you, like 1 through 80. So, including Daredevil #1, just awesome stuff from back in the day. But these are all the comics I have to show you, and I need to get these bagged and board show and to get them into these boxes. So I need to step up my game. So I'm doing this twice a week now. Typically on Saturdays, a little bit more of a mixed bag, and on Wednesdays is a run. And so today, we're going to finish this run of Daredevil, and I'm going to show you what I think are some of my favorite Daredevil comics because they're so cool, and a lot of people just don't know about this little era of Daredevil. So let's take a look at them. All right, this is Daredevil 81. So what's interesting about this, you say? Well, Black Widow's on the cover. So Black Widow at this time wasn't really the character that fleshed out in the way that we know in the MCU. Certainly not the type of character that would get her own solo movie. I mean, frankly, when Black Widow was first introduced, she did not have the black skin-tight jumpsuit uniform that has become iconic over the years. She was kind of like dressed as a countess or something. It's an entirely different character with no depth, and it was here that Black Widow kind of got a lot of her depth. Daredevil wasn't shooting up the sales charts. Black Widow really wasn't appearing in any stories. Marvel during the Silver Age had really done a lot of interesting stuff where they would, the Tales to Astonish, those types of things where they would have two characters appear in the same title. So they're like, hey, let's go back to our bread and butter. Two characters appear in the title. And so this, Daredevil number 81, fantastic little era of Daredevil where the Black Widow and Daredevil essentially became a buddy title. So this is number 82. Now, Black Widow was not on the cover here, but this was part of the era. 83, Mr. Hyde, classic Daredevil villain. Now, if you see here, maybe they were scrapping a little bit, but Marvel loved to play the little rope-a-dope on what was actually happening. This is 84. This is 85. I love that cover. Of course, Gladiator was a classic Daredevil villain. You had a little bit of GGA, Good Girl Art, here on the front. Daredevil is springing into action. And so let's pause a little bit why this is significant, because nowadays everyone remembers the Frank Miller Daredevil. So Daredevil before Frank Miller, before the 80s, Daredevil wasn't like this grim, dark, depressing title. Frank Miller, he needs some counseling. He likes everything dark, and so his take on the character took it that way. Daredevil's a little bit more swashbuckling. You forget, his rogues gallery was the Owl, Stilt Man, for heaven's sakes. Gladiator was part of his rogues gallery, so he was a little bit more fun. He didn't have that heavy, dark guilt, brooding. Everything went bad for Matt Murdock, and now, of course, there's always that in Marvel Comics. There's always those complications that occurred in Marvel Comics, and certainly that happened here. But it was during the Frank Miller is when it really took a turn to hardcore and dark, gritty stories. Here, the Ox, and again, a little bit more not fun-loving, but kind of one and done, fun rogues, that sort of thing. The Purple Man. Now, the Purple Man, if you've seen the first season of Jessica Jones, you realize the Purple Man. Purple Man was introduced early on in Daredevil, part of his rogues gallery. Here's number 89. Here, like I said, Natasha was a part of this era. So here is Natasha. Oh no, Daredevil is falling. This was good. Uh-oh. You have known fear, Masked Man. Now shake hands with death. So Mr. Fear was part. So a lot of folks nowadays are like, oh my gosh, Daredevil, they just received a word that it's coming to Disney Plus, and folks are like, oh, there's no way that Daredevil can be on Disney Plus because it has to be rated R. Listen, you can tell a Daredevil story on Disney Plus that's pre-Frank Miller, that again is still filled with action and adventure, great characters, great villains, and it doesn't have to be rated R. These comics show that, and I really wish we would have seen Daredevil with Black Widow, but that is not meant to be. Now, here's what's interesting. This is number 92. Number 92 is when the title officially got the name change. So it became Daredevil and the Black Widow. Again, you just saw 15 or so issues before where she was introduced, and there was kind of a buddy cop thing. It's official now. They're dating. And in fact, they really are dating. So a lot of folks don't know about this era. This is when Matt Murdock and Black Widow became a couple, and it was one of the iconic relationships of the Marvel Universe up to this point in history. In fact, a lot of people don't realize it was in this era that Daredevil and Black Widow moved to San Francisco together and got an apartment together. So this was way back in the day. So that was scandalous. They were living in sin. Marvel kind of stepped forward on some storylines there that just were unheard of in the day. So they were living together in San Francisco. They were one of the great romances at the time, and they battled together. And it was, again, I think, just a great part of the Daredevil comic that's entirely overlooked. A lot of folks don't know about it because everything has just settled into the Frank Miller-esque era. So here is number 96. Number 97. I don't remember that character, the Black Messiah character, much. If you do, you can, in the comments, let me know. This is number 98. What would Marvel Comics be without a guest star? You stole my girl, Hornhead. Well, all I want in return is your life. So a little bit of a love triangle. This is the 100th issue. I love this cover so much, but it's just classic Daredevil up front. Of course, it is Daredevil and Black Widow, so the Black Widow here, but it refocuses on Daredevil. Some of these great rogues from Daredevil's past, the Owl, again, Gladiator, that we had talked about before, the Jester, Ox, Matador, some of these great pre-Frank Miller rogues gallery that Daredevil had, and I loved it. So that's 100. Here's 101. Ungar the Screamer is another one of those classic villains that's just ridiculous and fantastic. They really did fun stuff back in that era. Here is Daredevil swinging into action in 102. Here's 103. Spider-Man was, even back then, the most popular character, so he would constantly appear in other titles. Look at this. Here's a Spider-Man villain there. Bondage cover and Kraven the Hunter there. This is a key issue. This is, you'll know her as Moondragon now. This was Madame McEvil, which is just ridiculous, and then became Moondragon, and the Guardians of the Galaxy, it's said that she's going to be introduced there. It's the daughter of Drax. Drax was an entirely different character during this era. He was more of a space wizard. His daughter was Moondragon. She's an odd character. Was kind of revitalized and reimagined later on in the 2000s in the Annihilation run. And here is number 106. And we are going to end with 107. Because this is the last one, and it went back to the Daredevil numbering and dropped the Black Widow. kids, they broke up. Their romance did not last, but it would be kind of off and on for years. Again, this was one of the epic romances in the Marvel Universe. These two, and Natasha was heartbroken. Matt Murdock was like, "You always be the love of my life," but they did not make it. And it was at this time that the Black Widow left the title and went on to lead the Champions. And so the Champions, and at that point, Hercules was one of the members of the Champions. They went on to date, and even during that time when Black Widow and Hercules would date, Black Widow would say to Hercules' face that Daredevil was her true love, and it was, all the soap opera nature of Marvel Comics. But I love this run that was Daredevil starting out with Black Widow, and I just thought it was just a fantastic part of the Daredevil title. As an old school comic book fan, I really thought it would be great that to see Black Widow and Daredevil together. It's not meant to be, but I'm super excited that we're going to see more Daredevil. Charlie Cox is an excellent Daredevil. They're continuing those stories on Disney Plus. Fear not. Daredevil does not have to be grimdark to have exciting, interesting, compelling comic book stories. These were proof of that in some of the early stories as well. Some of the villains, maybe not as dark as Frank Miller would have us be, but just super compelling. I'm excited about it. I think Charlie Cox is a fantastic Daredevil. Will be great on Disney Plus as well, and I'm looking forward to that. So I do runs like this occasionally because I got to get these comics over here. On other days, I'll just do a little bit of a grab bag, a little bit of mix and match. The best thing to do is just subscribe. Jump through Google's hoops, and that way you'll know, and you can follow along in that way in case I decide I want to go out and have fun, and I don't want to make a video on a Wednesday, then you won't miss anything. But I appreciate you watching. All right, you take care, nerds.